And we're now moving to the current time, Nostra Aetate, our time. And in an address earlier this year, Pope Leo said the following: relations between the Catholic Church and Muslims have been marked by a growing commitment to dialogue and fraternity, fostered by esteem for these our brothers and sisters. He continued, this approach, based on mutual respect and freedom of conscience, is a solid foundation for building bridges between our communities. So Zuleyah, would you like to comment on the bridges between our communities that have been built in the more recent years?
Yes, I guess more recently, well, if we go, there's definitely been bridges built, and I feel very blessed to have been part of that process. Like, when I say recent, you know, considering we're talking about a 60-year span, you know, beginning of the 2000s, things just transformed, I feel. And I do think September 11 played a huge role in triggering certain initiatives. And because of September 11, and I think because the Catholic Church was open to dialogue at that point, it was an incredible era where, for example, the first Abraham conference was in 2002. When we had the Mosque Open Days in 2001, the Catholic Church was again very, I guess, supportive, and you know, came, and we were invited to many churches. So there was a lot of initiative happening, a lot of activity happening, and I think that has continued. And a lot of those relationships have actually matured, because like any relationship, whether it's between spouses, between children, these kind of relationships need maturing as well and developing. And I definitely have seen that in myself. And I think, you know, one trip we had, if you remember Professor Ismail, it was to Istanbul and Rome trip, and I saw that David Schultz is here, John DeFruit is here. We all went. Those kind of moments are transformative, and so at a personal level, I've definitely seen it, and I think it then has an impact on the next generation. So I'm seeing it in my children and so forth. But I suppose I would have, like, considering I've been involved in dialogue for 25 years. While those initiatives are there, I would have liked to see more, and I would have liked it to mature into a new level, which we can reflect on maybe a bit more with it later on. But it's a good place to be, and I do think one of the challenges is that we can't continue to preach to the converted, as we keep saying, that we need to have more people on board on this with dialogue, especially in the era that we're going through now. With Trumpism and all that. Look, I look at you, Scott, for some reason when I say that. As if you're responsible, which you're not, no. But it's a really challenging. It's a really challenging time, and that's why we need dialogue more than ever before. Can I say as well, I just want to mention, it's kind of like a side note, but these kind of initiatives, I would say in a way I'm a product of it in a number of ways. One, Theological event inspired me significantly to be involved in interfaith dialogue, and this is why leadership is so important. Because if leaders promoted, scholarly leaders, religious leaders, you think, okay, this is something worth considering. It was so worth considering that I ended up doing my master's looking at interfaith dialogue from an Islamic perspective, because I was involved and I wanted to be convinced that this was something I was very much entrenched in Islamic teachings, which it was. And then to do my PhD at ACU, where Professor Ismail was my supervisor. That was a very significant pivotal moment. And because of that, we now have a centre. I guess I have the qualifications and the scholarship that I earned here to establish a centre at Charles Sturt University. So you see these kind of ripple effects taking place. They're big. We don't always measure them, but they're significant and they're having an impact.
There's some wonderful bridge analogies there, including one between Charles Sturt and ACU. Ismail, do you want to comment on bridge building?
I think the most important bridge built by establishing this chair, the second one is re-establishing this chair. Zuleyah talks more on local level. I think only give one example. There was a Turkish school here, Cat 5, and I never forget the first time when even the fire workers still working, the first people who appear in front of this school, this Muslim school, the Catholic Archbishop and Anglican Archbishop, and I really never forget this show. But in international level, more there are, we really see the real impact of Nostra Aetate in 90s, start 90s, and especially in 2000 and following years. And this is, I think, we have to, in 1998, when Mr. Gülen met with Pope John Paul II, the same year, 20 years ago, when George Anavati gave a talk in ISRA, people are very aggressive, ISRA ulema, the Egyptian scholars are very aggressive. But in 1998, the same university established an interfaith dialogue center, and they put Nostra Aetate in their curriculum to teach their own students. This is a big achievement. But as I told you, in Turkey, Gülen movement worked very hard to really connect with people, and Catholic partners play a significant role in this partnership. But I do remember very well in Turkey, religious education is compulsory, and unfortunately, the depiction of the Jews and Christians in this text in early 80s and 90s, it is terrible. It's really exclusivist, extremely exclusivist. And but when these dialogue activities started, and people really involved and see living Christianity in front of them, and the content of these books change. And again, really the Hizmet movement's contribution to this change is enormous. They quote many passages from Gospel, from Old Testament, New Testament, and they give serious example from the church fathers and all other things. It is really in the long term. It takes time, but in long term it gives good fruits, and it is very, very important. I mean, many Muslim leaders met with popes, different popes, and popes visited many Muslim countries. As you know, this document on human fraternity is very important document in Abu Dhabi in 2019, Pope Francis, and this is really, I mean, many Muslim comment on this document as an actualization of Nostra Aetate. Actually, it is very important. And Saudi Arabia is very traditional and really very textual. It's literal country. Muslims are Scott knows very well. They belong to certain school of thought. But what we see is they establish King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz International Interfaith Dialogue Center, and they are inviting people and discussing this issue. It is, there is a Marrakesh Declaration, and Abdullah Beya is one of the leading scholars. Pope John Paul II worked very hard to really, to increase awareness among Muslim majority country to their relation with minorities. And we see, and I'm proud of this document actually, Muslims come together and made a document and how they show their responsibility to look after their minorities, and there are too many. And finally, I think a couple of days ago I was listening to Scott, and I really love this expression. Scott told me, that dialogue in Hizmet people's in genes. They have internalized these values. And Gülen says, if our wars 50 times change, we never ever give up connecting with other religious tradition and working together. And this is very important. And I am very glad and very grateful to our university and our supporters for the establishment of this chair. Really, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ismail. Scott, would you like to give us an American example of bridge building?
Okay, well, so my American example is going to be his myth in the Gulen movement, because I haven't said enough about that. To whatever degree the Catholic Muslim Studies program at CTU, Catholic Theological Union, has been successful. I'm no longer director. A dream of mine I had for many years, but I had to raise the money to help make that dream come true, is that now we have a full-time tenure-track Muslim professor as director of the Catholic Muslim Studies program. The success, to whatever degree one could say it has been successful, owes a great debt to the Hizmet movement and to Hoja Effendi. In fact, it's a little known fact because it was never made public, but the Board of Trustees of Catholic Theological Union voted unanimously to award Hoja Effendi with a Doctor of Theology, an honorary doctorate of theology. But we had this rule, I'm sorry to say, that the recipients had to attend. And so Fethullah Gülen and Hoja Effendi couldn't attend because of health reasons, but he sent us a beautiful letter. We certainly got the message about how much he was loved. And you know, early on we thought we really need Muslim students in our program, especially the Masters in Interreligious Studies, because we had this sense that, you know, Muslim students would be important teachers for their Catholic colleagues, right? And as soon as, you know, this was expressed, I was able to express this at some iftar or something, I started to get calls from my brothers and sisters in Hizmet, you know, saying, I think this person might like to come, I think that person might like to come. And it was clear, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but it wasn't as if these people who came to be students didn't want to be there. But it was clear that this was a duty that was assigned to somebody, right? And from my experience, I think they were happy to fulfill it, right? But it shows you that level of commitment in the movement, right? That this friendship that we're trying to establish, we need to give as much as we possibly can. And I've been the recipient of such enormous grace. Not to mention the fact that this man, Fethullah Gülen, is a waliullah, he's a friend of God, he's a saint. And the times I've met him in my journey, learning about his teachings and how he embodies the very best of Islam, right, has been an inspiration to me in my teaching, in my writing, and in my personal spiritual journey.
Thanks, Scott.